Can one banker destroy an entire empire? History says no. Empires fall to war, plague, or revolution, not accounting errors. But Venice is the exception. One man, one loan, one miscalculation. And within months, the most sophisticated financial system in medieval Europe was gone. His name has been forgotten, but his mistake is still being repeated. When most people think about Venice's decline, they imagine Ottoman expansion, shifting trade routes, or the age of exploration diminishing the city's importance. All of that happened, but it happened much later. Venice's real collapse began in 1348, and the cause wasn't an external threat. It was something at the heart of the city: debt. Today, I'm going to show you how Venice fell. But this isn't just a history lesson, because the mechanism that destroyed Venice is the exact same mechanism that destroyed Lehman Brothers in 2008. The same leverage, the same hidden debts, the same domino effect. The only difference: Venice had no central bank to bail them out. So we get to see what happens when the system actually collapses. To understand Venice's fall, we need to go back to before 1348, when the city was at the height of its power. At the beginning of the 14th century, Venice was the wealthiest city in Europe. Its population was around 100 to 20,000, a massive number for the time. Marble palaces, ships filling the canals. And most importantly, it had the most advanced banking system in Europe. Venice's wealth came from trade, but not just trade in goods, trade in credit. Venetian banks dealt in bills of exchange, letters of credit, and loan contracts. A merchant could make a payment to a Venetian banker in London and collect the money in Constantinople. No need to transport physical gold or silver. This system made Venice indispensable. But this system rested on one thing: trust. And trust is fragile. Venetian banks were tightly interconnected. One bank would borrow from another, which would lend to another, which would lend to yet another. If one banker failed, the ripples would spread fast. And in 1348, the ripple began. In June 1348, the plague reached Venice, the Black Death, the deadliest pandemic in European history. Within 2 years, it would kill nearly half of Europe's population. Venice was particularly vulnerable, crowded, humid. And because it was the center of trade, disease arrived constantly on ships. When the first cases appeared in June, the city's leaders panicked. They closed ports, imposed quarantines. But it was too late. By August, hundreds were dying each day. By September, thousands. The streets went silent, shops closed, workers abandoned their fields, merchants abandoned their ships. And the banks? The banks faced a problem. Their clients were dying, their borrowers were dying. Their collateral, land, goods, future harvests became meaningless because there was no one left to work them. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that the banks owed money to each other. One of Venice's largest banks was controlled by a family. We don't know their name because the records have been lost, but we know their impact. This bank had lent heavily to Venetian merchants, spice trade, textiles, grain imports. These loans were safe. Merchants were paying, trade was flowing, profits were being made. But when the plague began, these loans stopped being repaid. Merchants were dying. Ships were rotting in harbors. Goods weren't selling. The bank faced a choice: accept the losses and shrink, or lend more money to roll over the debt. It chose the second option. The bank extended more credit to failing merchants, allowing them to repay old debts. This is what modern finance calls a zombie loan. Not real repayment, just an illusion maintained to keep the books clean. But to finance these loans, the bank had to borrow from other banks, and this is where the crack began. In March 1349, the first bank collapsed. Not officially, there was no such thing as bankruptcy in medieval times. It just closed its doors, announced it couldn't repay its depositors. Panic began instantly. In Venice, banks operated without deposit insurance. If a bank failed, you lost all your money. So, when the first bank collapsed, Venetians rushed to withdraw their money from other banks. But the money wasn't there. Banks operated on fractional reserve. They kept only a portion of deposits on hand and lent out the rest. This worked in normal times because not everyone would ask for their money at once. But now everyone was asking. The second bank collapsed within 2 weeks, then the third, then the fourth. Each time a bank failed, the chain reaction accelerated, because every bank owed money to other banks. When Bank A collapsed, Bank B couldn't collect its money. which meant Bank B couldn't pay Bank C, and so on. By the end of 1349, most of Venice's major banks were gone. When the banks collapsed, Venice's monetary system collapsed with them. In medieval times, most money wasn't physical, it was bank money or credit money. Entries that existed in ledgers and contracts, a document showing that a banker owed you money. When the bank failed, that money disappeared. It literally evaporated. A merchant who was wealthy one day could be penniless the next, not bankrupt. The records just no longer meant anything. The bank's ledger was gone, and with it, your fortune. The Venetian government tried to intervene. It ordered banks to reopen. It demanded forced loans. It pressured wealthy families to contribute to bailouts. None of it worked, because the problem wasn't liquidity. The problem was trust. No one trusted the banks anymore. No one wanted to take credit. And most importantly, no one wanted to accept Venetian money. Merchants reverted to gold and silver. Foreign trade collapsed. Venice's monetary system turned to stone. The plague ended in 1350. But Venice's banking system never recovered. Merchants returning to the city tried to establish new banks. But trust was gone. Investors had withdrawn. And competition was already coming. Florence, Genoa, then Amsterdam. These cities watched Venice's mistakes and built stronger systems, central oversight, mandatory reserves, state-backed credit. Venice was left behind. It was still wealthy, yes, still powerful, but it was no longer indispensable. It never would be again. By the 1500s, the center of European finance wasn't Venice, it was Florence. By the 1600s, it was Amsterdam. By the 1800s, London. Venice became a museum, magnificent, beautiful, and completely irrelevant. So what's the lesson here? Venice didn't fall because of the plague. The plague was the trigger, but the real cause was how the financial system was built. Venice's banks were indebted to each other. They operated with leverage. There was no transparency, no regulation. And when the crisis hit, the government had no tools to intervene. Sound familiar? When Lehman Brothers collapsed in 2008, the global financial system nearly went down with it, because Lehman owed money to other banks, to insurance companies, to hedge funds. The only difference was that this time, central banks intervened. They printed money. They bailed out the banks. They froze the system. Venice didn't have that option. But what about next time? When the next crisis comes, will central banks be able to rescue it again? If history teaches us anything, it's this. Systems built on debt eventually collapse. The only question is when. Venice learned that. Maybe we will too. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.